Hello, everybody. It's Zach here from RealEstateLicenseWizard.com. How's it going today? Hopefully good. Today I'm going to go over 50 of our 255 real estate exam vocab terms that you need to know. These terms are super important for your real estate career and, of course, are especially important for your real estate exam. So this is the fourth part of this series, and so far it's been going pretty great. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you like, subscribe for more real estate exam related stuff. That way you can pass the real estate exam no problem. Now, before I jump right into it, of course, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. If you want the full text version of all these vocab terms, just head over to our website, realestatelicensewizard.com, click the resources tab, and look at our ultimate guide on real estate terms. Link down below. All right, so the way this is going to work is just like before. I'm going to read you guys the term, give you guys a couple seconds to come up with your explanation, and we're going to see if the explanations match the textbook version. And one last thing. Don't be afraid to keep score, paper and pencil, and leave a score of what you got down below in the comment section. Let's see who can do the best. All right, guys, without further ado, 151, here we come. All right, so our first term today is going to be leasehold estate. So what is a leasehold estate? All right, here's a couple seconds for you guys to think this one over, and then I'll come back and give you the explanation. Okay. Do you guys remember we in the previous video, hopefully, we actually covered freehold estates? Well, this is slightly different. This is the opposite. So, a leasehold estate or a less than freehold estate is an estate held by one who rents or leases property. Now, the key difference between a leasehold and a freehold estate is the limitation of time. A lease is a legal estate. Leasehold can be bought and sold on the open market. So, again, the difference here is a leasehold estate is renting or leasing, where a freehold estate is indefinitely. So that's the difference there. Super important to know, but yeah, it's simple as that. All right, next one, lender. Okay, lender. So here's a quick opportunity for you guys to think this one over. Okay, so hopefully you guys are familiar with this term. It's a pretty simple one here. What is a lender? Well, a lender can obviously be an individual or a private group, a financial institution like a bank that basically lends funds available to another person. A lender is usually where people get loans. It's as simple as that. Um, when we're talking about lenders and when you guys are talking about lenders in your career, you're going to be talking about banks, mortgage companies, things like that. All right, next one, leasee. Okay. Leasee. So actually, I'll do you one better. We're gonna do these two terms together. We got leasee and leaseor. So leasee and leaseor. All right, I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity to think this one over. All right. So, do you guys know what the difference is? Hopefully. So a leasee is for a tenant, or is a term for a tenant who leases a property, while the leaseor is the one who leases property to a tenant, or like the landlord, basically. So that's the key difference between the two, but both terms super important to know. All right, next one, leverage, leverage, leverage. Okay, so what is leverage? So here's a couple seconds for you guys to come up with your explanation. All right, guys, what is leverage? Well, leverage is an investment strategy of using borrowed cash to finance a bulk of an investment. So, again, I've mentioned this in our previous videos. This term is going to have to deal with investing, more specifically, real estate investing for what we need to know. And as I mentioned as well in our other videos, real estate investing terms come up in some states more than others, but nevertheless, it's important to know these types of things. All right. All right. Next term is levy. All right. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to think this one over. Okay. So when you hear this term, what do you want to think of? Well, you want to think of typically a debt. and how to satisfy it. And that's pretty much what the definition is. So levy is a legal seizure of property to satisfy a tax debt or obligation. So that's pretty much it on that one. All right, next one. Here we go. Lien. So I talked about this not just in our last video, but I believe in the one before this. So uh, liens have shown up quite a few times in all of these 255 vocab terms. Liens are super important. So take your time, kind of think of what a lien potentially could be, and then I'll give you guys the explanation. Okay, so what's a lien? Well, a lien is a form of security interest granted over an item to secure the payment of a debt or performance of some other obligation. A lien serves to guarantee an underlying obligation. Usually, that obligation is the repayment of a loan. So, what does that mean? Well, as we mentioned before, uh, a lien would be like a mortgage. So they place a mortgage on your house, or well, it's technically, well, it depends on the state, but in most states, once you have a mortgage on your house, you technically uh, actually, it depends on whether it's lien theory or title theory states. Going off a little tangent, but in lien theory states, the way it works is they place a lien on the property. So technically, if for some reason you don't pay, you're having issues. Maybe you're not paying your taxes, or maybe you're not paying your payments. They can grant the security, or in this case, the house or the property, as a guarantee for the obligation. So instead of some long process of going for all of your assets and suing them, it's as simple as that. Well, they get a lien, or they had a lien, so they get your property. So super important to know. Again, there's different types of liens, as we mentioned, involuntary, voluntary liens, things like that. Uh, and, but yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. Again, I could talk about liens for hours, but we actually do have a video on liens, so I encourage you guys to watch that if you guys are still a little bit curious and confused, or just want to know about more about liens. All right, next one. Here we go. Life estate. So think this one over. Going to give you guys an opportunity to just come up with the answer here. Okay, so let's see. So what are we doing here? Life estates? Perfect. Okay, so when we're talking about life estates, what are we talking about? Well, we are talking about an estate that is an interest in real property held for the duration of the life of a designated person. So that's where it gets the name of life estate, because it's the duration of the life of a designated person. Now, it may be limited by the life of the person holding it or by the life of another person. This designated person is called a life tenant. So, super important term that you guys definitely need to be familiar with if you aren't already. All right, next one, limited liability company, or LLC. So, what is an LLC? So, here's a couple of moments for you guys to think this one over. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I think in the first 50 questions, or I'm sorry, 50 50 vocab terms or definitions. I keep saying questions. Excuse me for that. Um, for the first 50, we talked about uh, business structures and business forms of businesses, and this is a form of business. An LLC is a form of business. Why is this important to know? Well, because an LLC can, in fact, uh, purchase property under the LLC, which is super important to know. So the definition, though, is a structure of LLCs vary from state to state, but an LLC is a hybrid legal entity that has certain characteristics of both a corporation and a partnership or sole proprietorship. So again, it's kind of like a hybrid legal entity, but they can, in fact, purchase property under the LLC and not under the specific person or partnership. So This is super important to know. Obviously, when you when you're working in commercial real estate, you need to be familiar with business structures. That way, when you're talking to clients, you know whether or not they're what their legal status is and whether or not they are buying the property for themselves or if it's for their business, things like that. So, all right, next one, limited partnership. So it looks like we're sticking with the business terms here. So give you guys a couple moments to think this one over. Okay, so if you guys remember, um, we were and when I mentioned the fact that there's many different types of business structures. This is one of them. And what this is a limited partnership is composed of one or more general partners and one or more limited partners. General partners manage the business and share fully in its profits and losses. Limited partners share in the profits of the business, but their losses are limited to the extent of their investment. So here's a quick example. Let's say I want to invest in a business, but uh, I'm not entirely sure that I want to get fully like I want all the strings attached. Maybe I just want to, and okay, we'll use this example. Maybe I have a brother and he's got this fantastic business idea and I want to help him out, but I don't want to work with him. I don't want to do the day-to-day stuff, but I still want to reap the rewards if he does get big. So let's say I give him a $50,000, bundle of money to help finance a business. I am a limited partner, meaning that I'm going to share in some of the profits of the businesses or the business, but the losses are limited to that extent of the investment. Meaning, let's say he goes bankrupt, or maybe he gets, let's say, worst case scenario, he gets sued. Well, because I'm a limited partner, I'm technically protected, so I don't need to. Once I lose that, 50,000 or whatever it might be, that's it. I'm good. Um, they can't come for me. Basically, that's pretty much what that means. All right, next one, liquidity. What is liquidity? All right. So again, think of this in terms of real estate investing. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to think this one over. All right. So, um, liquidity. What do you guys know about liquidity? Well, liquidity is the net price and speed of how long it would take to sell an asset and convert it to cash. So, when one of your clients is discussing some of their assets and you're trying to figure out, um, you know, how you can convert it into cash so that maybe they can buy another property, you would reference it as how liquid it is. How liquid are their assets? So, an example. Well, let me ask you guys this, a bonus question here. What is the most liquid thing ever? Well, it's going to be cash because it's already, it's there. It's easy to transfer. Something that's not as liquid would be something like a property. Because again, you have to put it for sale, it takes time. You got to depend on the market. Um, a house wouldn't be as liquid as something like cash. Um, so yeah, that's kind of an example. Stocks. That's another thing that would be uh, pretty liquid. That's more liquid than a house because you could sell stocks like Monday through Friday basically. Whereas a house, it's going to take time. So super important to know. So keep that in mind. All right, Liz Pendants. All right. What is Liz Pendants? So give you guys an opportunity to think this one over. Okay, so what is Liz Pendants? Well, Liz Pendants isn't a lien, but instead is a notice of a potential future lien. So that's one of these terms that I know it's pretty obscure, but they love to throw in these obscure terms on the exam. You just need to know what it is. And again, it's not a lien. And that's what sometimes people get confused, but it's a notice of a potential future lien. Um, yeah. Simple as that. All right, a listing agreement. What is a listing agreement? So think this one over. I'll give you guys some time to come up with the answer. Okay, so what's a listing agreement, guys? You guys know? Hopefully. Listing agreements are super important. So, a listing agreement is a document in which a property owner contracts with a real estate agent to find a buyer for the owner's property. So, let's say you and your husband or you and your wife are deciding to move and you guys want to sell your property. Well, you guys are going to fill out a listing agreement with a real estate agent to find a buyer for the owner's property or for your property. It's as simple as that. But this is one of the most important documents. So be familiar with this, all the ins and outs, uh, especially when you guys become agents, because again, this is just this is bread and butter for real estate agents. So, all right, next term, littoral rights. Littoral rights. Okay, think this one over. I'll give you guys a moment to come up with it. Okay, what do you guys know about littoral rights? Well, I'll give you guys a hint. It deals with water. So maybe you needed that hint, maybe you didn't, maybe you already know. What are littoral rights? Well, littoral rights pertain to landowners whose land border large navigational lakes or oceans. Here is the $1 million easy way to remember this. Littoral lakes, littoral lakes, littoral lakes. The L meaning lakes. It's as simple as that, guys. Littoral lakes. Say it with me. Littoral lakes, littoral lakes. That's how you remember that one. Simple as that. All right, so loan is our next term. I'll give you guys 2 seconds for this one. This one's a pretty easy one. Okay, so obviously, hopefully, you guys are familiar with loans by now if you've been following along. Plus, maybe you have experience with loans. But a loan is just an amount of money that is expected to be paid back with interest used for property. And obviously, in our case, real estate, that's what we're talking about. So most people, in order to purchase property, use some form of loan. Some common loans are student loans, mortgages, and car loans, things like that. All right, easy one. Next one, lot and block. So, gonna give you guys some time for this one. Think it over. All right. What is lot and block? Well, if you guys have been paying attention, to call back to some of our earlier definitions, this is an appraisal method. So, the way this works is it's an appraisal method particular for areas densely populated, like metropolitan areas and suburbs. It starts with a large tract of land that has already been described by another form of survey system. The overall area is made into smaller lots and a map is created. So actually, I think this is a misprint. So it's not an appraisal method; it's a survey method. Although technically to you could use it to look at an appraisal to see how much property is on there. But yeah, disregard this first part. This is supposed to say it's a survey method. But yeah, it's just one of those survey methods that, again, we have to be familiar with for the exam. So keep that in mind. All right, market value slash market price. So think this one over. I know this is a little bit of a controversial one. I'm just kidding. But yeah, think this one over. Okay, what do we know about market value, market price? Well, in our instance, that is the actual selling price of the property. So if your home sells for $200,000, its market value is $200,000. Pretty self-explanatory there. All right, master plan. What is the master plan? So give you guys some time to think about this one. Okay, so what do you guys know about a master plan? Well, master plan is a comprehensive plan to guide long-term physical development in a particular area. So this comes up with zoning and local governments when they want to distinctly maybe develop a certain area of town. They're going to have a master plan. Most areas have master plans to look at, so that, as a reference guide. Um, as an agent, I mean, you kind of have to be familiar with this. For the instance of if you're working in commercial property or real estate investing, obviously you want to make sure that you're maintaining and you're following the zoning guides, zoning rules, and the master plan. All right, next one, material defect. So if you remember, we talked about another defect in our last video, so keep that in mind. So here's some time for you guys. Okay, so do you remember what a material defect is? Do you guys know that? Is this new to you? All right, so well, a material defect is a problem with property or any portion of it that would have significant impact to the value of property or that involves a large risk to the people on the property. So this is something that it's going to have a huge risk to the people on it. So um, maybe the roof is on the verge of collapsing, something like that. Um, yeah, it's significant. So when you think in a material, just think of large, big, um, high risk, that sort of deal. All right, next one. Oh, mechanics lien. So we were talking about liens earlier, so keep that in mind. All right, I'll give you guys a couple seconds for this one. Okay, so if you guys remember when we were talking about liens, they are financial claims on property. So let's take a look at what a mechanics lien is. Well, mechanics lien, also called a construction lien, is a lien placed on property for non-payment of work that you may have had done to your property. So let's imagine you had a pool installed and you put it on credit. And maybe it's this elaborate pool and it costs like $50,000. It's in ground. Maybe you also redid like your whole porch, did all this work, but then you didn't pay, and for some reason you didn't pay. Well, the construction company could actually put a mechanics lien on the property because you haven't paid them for doing their work. So this is another involuntary lien. We talked about what those are before. So obviously it's not a good thing. It's typically against the owner's wishes. But yeah, that's pretty much it on mechanics liens. All right. So next one, meets and bounds. Okay. So this is I'll give you a little hint. This is another surveying method slash appraisal thing that they use. So give you guys some time to think this one over. Okay, so what's meets and bounds? Well, that's another method imported to the original colonies that was formed in the United States. Now, this system uses physical features of local geography. One of the directions is to define and describe the boundaries of parcel of land. So, pretty much, this goes into that surveying methods that we were talking about earlier, where they do uh, use this to kind of determine where specifically property is, where it ends, things like that. But you do have to be familiar with you don't have to be familiar with like how to do these things, but you do need to be familiar with how they work for the exam. All right, next one. Mill rate. Okay, this is super important to understand. So come up with your explanation on this one. I'll give you guys a few seconds. Okay, so are you guys familiar with mill rates? If you have some experience with taxes, property taxes, you should be. So, what's a mill rate? Well, a mill rate is the amount of tax payable per dollar of the assessed value of a property. Mill rate is also known as the mileage rate. So, yeah, you could, use that term interchangeably: mileage, mill rate, things like that. But again, is the amount of tax payable per dollar of the assessed value of the property. This is super important when you're calculating property taxes, to be familiar with this term. Our next one, a mortgage. Okay. All right. I'll give you guys a couple seconds for this one. This one should be pretty easy for you guys. Okay. So what's a mortgage? Well, let's see. A mortgage is a promise. Mortgage is a promise of property to the lender as security of payment for the debt. So, as I talked about earlier, when we were talking about liens, a mortgage would be a lien. It is a promise of property to the lender as security of payment for debt. So, simple as that, but you know, super you know, super important. And of course, the next one is going to be something to go with it: mortgage lien. So the more specific term, I'll just briefly go over this because kind of already talked about it, but these terms go hand in hand. A mortgage lien is a voluntary specific lien, and it's the most common type of voluntary real estate lien. It's when you borrow money to buy real estate, you give the lender a lien against the property. Some states call this a deed of trust lien. Deed of trust lien. So keep that in mind. All right, next one. MLS, or multiple listing service. So here's some time to think this one over. Okay, what's the MLS? Well, MLS is a service used by a group of real estate brokers. It's a national service. It connects listings together under one large brokerage, or I'm sorry, one large umbrella. So what's the purpose of this? Well, the purpose of the MLS is so that agents can connect easier and under one specific service. So, you hear about these things called Zillow and all these websites where you can look at listings. Well, agents have specific access to MLS, and it's got everything on there, not just like regular houses for sale, but foreclosures, tax sales, like everything on there. And it's way better than using some of those websites, and it's one of the perks of becoming an agent is that you have access to the MLS. So, all right, municipality, municipality. I always butcher this word. Sorry about that. So, what is that? Give you guys an opportunity to think this one over. Okay, so what is this? What is a municipality? Again, I butchered it. I'm sorry. All right. All that is a city or town that is considered local government. Simple as that. Why do you need to know this? Well, you need to be familiar with your local governments, not just your state government and the federal. Okay, next one, negative fraud. What is negative fraud? So here's some time to think this one over. Okay, so we did talk about fraud before a little bit. Here's some more. So, negative fraud is the act of purposely leaving out information you legally must disclose, or in plain terms, lying through omission. So, an example of this would be if maybe your client told you that the property had some sort of asbestos problem or something bad, and you're showing the house to a seller, or I'm sorry, to a buyer, and maybe the buyer's like, oh well, does it have any issues? Like, is there any sort of like uh, things that I should be aware of, and you're like, oh nope. Anyway, how's your daughter doing? I heard she's doing well. It's like it's like lying, and it's purposely leaving out information. It's almost like changing subjects or just lying through like omission, just pretending like you know you don't know anything when in reality that you do. Like in that instance, you obviously should disclose those issues. So simple as that. Okay, negligence. So this is different than negative fraud slightly. So here's a couple opportunities for you guys to think this one. Okay, so what's negligence? Well, negligence is the omission to perform a required action, or in plain terms, laziness. So, while negative fraud, we were talking about lying through omission, while negligence is just not doing it. So, for example, maybe instead of in our last example, we said that the client told you that there was an issue with the house. Well, maybe instead of them telling you, you don't even ask, or maybe the client's like, uh, yeah, I'm not really sure. Uh, or okay, here's a good example. Let's say maybe an aunt and uncle passed away, and they left the property to their great niece or something, or nephew, and they've never even been to the house. And so the agent calls up the niece and is like, hey, like, do you know of any issues with the house? And obviously they say, well, I've never even been there. Like, I don't know. You should probably, check and, find out, and we'll schedule a inspection, something like that. And let's say as an agent, you don't do that. You just put the house on the market and you're like, screw it. And you just kind of like, don't go through your due diligence. Well, that would be negligence, because you are not doing what needs to be done. That's why it's often just called laziness, because it's your job, you need to do it. So all right, next one, net listing, type of listing. So here's a couple seconds for you guys. Okay, so what's a net listing? Well, net listing is when an agent agrees to sell an owner's property for a set minimum price. Anything over the minimum price belongs to the agent as commission, and I would put a quote behind that as net profit. That's almost like how I think of it. So think of it like this. Let's say you set up a net listing with somebody, and they're like, "Listen, as long as you can get it for 50,000, sell the house. Anything above it, you can have the difference." That's what a net listing is. So let's say you sell it for 70,000. Well, guess what? You get that 20,000. You'd get the difference. So that's how it works. Okay, net operating income. What is net operating income? So here's some time to think about this one. Okay, so when we're talking about net operating income, that's another one of those investment or investing terms. And what this is the total income of a property minus all operating expenses. So it's important to know for real estate investing. So hopefully you guys are familiar with this, if that's what you guys are going to be getting into, or if that's something big on the state specific stuff for you guys. Okay, option E. So we're going at real estate terms start with O now. So option E. So think this one over. Okay, what's an option E? Well, it's a legal term for an individual that acquires and holds an option. Simple as that. And actually, we'll talk about the next one, optioner. Same thing goes hand in hand. That's the legal term for a party that allows or gives an option. So again, we're talking about the EEOR rule. which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, but this just distinguishes the two. Okay, next one, ownership. What is ownership? It's a short one, so I'll just go ahead and flip this. You should be familiar with it, but ownership is just the act, state, or right of possessing an object, in our case, of course, property. So if someone has ownership of property, that means they possess it. Simple as that. Alrighty. Ownership and severalty. Nice. This is a good one. Give you guys a couple seconds to figure this one out. Okay, what is ownership and severalty? You guys know? This just means one person owns the property. Simple as that. Just one person. So that's it for that one. Next one, partition. Oh, okay. What is partition? All right. Here's a couple seconds for you guys. Okay, what's partition? Well, partition is a legal way to dissolve a relationship when parties don't voluntarily agree to its termination. Good example is, excuse me, if two, let's see, neighbors or homeowners have a dispute and they don't want to get the courts involved, but they want to uh, dissolve. Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong thing. Partition. Let me refresh this. Okay. So sorry guys. After 185 definitions, sometimes it gets a little tough. Okay. Partition is a legal way to dissolve the relationship when parties don't voluntarily agree. So disregard that example I was giving earlier about neighbors. Partition is, let's say that you're in the process of buying a house and a seller, maybe, you check out the house, you do an inspection, blah blah, and maybe you guys want them to fix the roof or something. And technically the sale contract is there. You guys didn't have anything in the contract that said, uh, that they needed to fix the roof. But technically, you already have a purchase agreement, so you guys could establish partition. You could dissolve the relationship because they both don't agree, and you could terminate the contract. So there's an example for that. Again, I apologize for messing up there. After 185 definitions, sometimes it gets a little tough. So bear with me. Okay, partnership is the next term. So, and this, I'll give you guys a little bit of a hint. We're talking about business partnerships, which, as we were talking about business structures earlier, think kind of about that. So here's a couple seconds for you guys. Okay, so as I mentioned, we talked about uh, business partnerships, or I'm sorry, business ownerships and forms of businesses, things like that. So we're going to be talking about the partnership. And what that is just a partnership is composed of two or more persons who agree to contribute money, labor, or skill to a business. Each partner shares profits, losses, management, and business, and each partner is personally and equally liable for the debts. That's a key takeaway there. They're equally liable for debts of the partnership. So, for example, let's say they sue. Maybe you're in a partnership with your brother or sister, and you guys get sued. Well, you guys are both liable to handle it. And let's say that you guys settle for like $200,000, and the business only has 50,000. Well, that $150,000 is going to have to come from both of you guys. Again, that's just the way a partnership works. That's why if you guys have taken business classes, you'll know typically they advise you to go with something protected like a corporation or an LLC. That way you're more protected. But yeah, pretty much it for that one. So, okay, pending property. So, what is pending property? I think we talked about this a little bit in the first 50, so we'll give you guys an opportunity to think about this one. All right, what's the deal with pending property? Well, the term pending just means that an offer has been accepted and both parties are moving towards with the sale. When a property is pending, it is in a period after the contingencies are resolved. So there's a clear distinction there between contingent property and pending property. Obviously, pending just means that everything's going well. It's just they still need time. Whether it but be like they set closing for next month because maybe they need to get their stuff in order, whatever it might be, that would be pending. Contingent property, remember, that is where there's a specific contingency involved. Like maybe, they're only going to buy the property if they get financed, things like that. So there's a slight difference, but, you do need to know the difference. All right, next one, percentage lease. What is a percentage lease? Okay, so percentage leases are used in rental properties. And basically, what it is, obviously, it's used in rental properties, but it is a rental that is based on percentage of the monthly or annual gross sales made on premises. So, what's an example of this? Maybe a strip mall. Maybe a strip mall has a rule where tenants have to pay a monthly fee, but they also have to give them a 2% 2% of their sales, things like that. That's a percentage lease. All right, next one. Periodic tenancy. What is periodic tenancy? Okay, are you guys familiar with this? So we did talk about some tenancies earlier. So a periodic tenancy is a leasehold agreement that specifies an initial period of tenancy and the length of the agreement, but does not end after the specified period. This type of leasehold agreement renews automatically. So pretty much, as it states, that's how it works. We talked about the other forms of tenancy earlier. These are important, so just be familiar with them. But the way I kind of remember this periodic period, time period, that's kind of how I remember that. All right, next one, personal property. Okay, so give you guys some time for this one. All right, so if you guys have been following along in this channel, we did go over real property and personal property, the differences before. When you think of personal property, you should think about things that are movable, or things that can be picked up and taken places. So they're things like clothes, lawnmowers, couches, TVs, furniture. That is personal property. Real property, obviously, would be the opposite, which we will talk a little bit later. All right, next one, power of attorney. What is a power of attorney? So here's a few seconds for you guys to think about this one. So I see this one as obviously sometimes people how should I say this? They get this mixed up with a couple other things, but a power of attorney is actually a document. It's a legal document that authorizes someone to act on behalf of another person, typically in business or for some sort of business transaction. So, remember we were talking about attorney in fact in our very first 50 definitions. Well, that would go hand in hand with this. So, basically, the legal document that authorizes a power of attorney. That's what this is. Eh, or I'm sorry, a legal document that authorizes an attorney a fact is a power of attorney. So even I sometimes get it mixed up. So it is a little bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, that's the difference. That's the way it works. All right, a prepayment penalty clause is our next term. So here's a couple seconds for you guys to think about this one. So we are on the topic of contract clauses again. This one is one that shows up on some contracts. It's becoming less and less popular. Well, I shouldn't say popular. It's never been really quote unquote popular. It's becoming less and less common to see in loans. But yeah, so prepayment penalty clause. What is that? Well, that's just a clause that states that a lender can penalize a borrower if the borrower pays off the mortgage much sooner than usual. So let's say you have a loan with a prepayment penalty clause, and it's a 30-year loan, and let's say you pay it off in 12 years. Well, they can knock you with a prepayment penalty and charge you extra money because you paid it off too fast. I know it's ridiculous. It's like, what? Why they even create such a thing? And I agree. And I think that's why they're not as relevant anymore, because a lot of finance and banks and places to finance, they don't do it as much because so many people were like upset about it because it is ridiculous. You'd think if someone would pay off a loan faster, they'd get the benefit of the doubt, but that is not always the case. So, all right, next one, price fixing. Oh, okay. We haven't had one of these types of terms in a while. So here's a couple seconds for you guys to think this one over. Okay, so when you hear price fixing, you should be thinking of antitrust laws. Remember we covered that in the first 50? Fixing is the practice of setting price of a good or service to make a particular price a standard. Any agreement, even if just implied with other brokerages to set a standard commission rate, is a violation of the antitrust law. So let me give you guys an example. Let's say you go to the coffee shop with your fellow agent, and you meet up with other agents that are in a competing brokerage, and you guys start talking, and maybe the agent that works with you mentions, oh yeah, like, we're charging like certain amount of commission, and then maybe the other agent's like, oh yeah, well, we should all charge the same amount. Well, uh, that would be considered price fixing, because again, even if that's implied, even if it is implied, it is a violation of the antitrust law. So don't talk about it. That's why, when they say you're not supposed to talk about your commission with other agents, this is what this is. This is what this is. So it's super important. Price fixing, or fixing for short, don't do it. Not only could you lose your license, you could be potentially sued, lose tons of money, and maybe even end up in jail. So don't do it. But be familiar with the term and be familiar of what it is. And obviously, like, what are ways that you can prevent it from occurring. Okay, principal. All right, and not a school principal, a different term, a real estate or a legal principal. I guess that would be a better example. So think that one over. Here's a couple seconds for you guys. Okay, so when we are thinking of principal, we are thinking of a party who signed an agreement with an agent, or more specifically, a broker. In other words, it is a person directly involved in a contract, such as a buyer or seller. So, yeah, the buyer and seller of a contract, they are going to be your principal or your client. They signed an agreement with you or your broker. All right, next one, promissory note. All right, so what is a promissory note? All right, so here's an opportunity for you guys to think about this one. Alrighty, so what is a promissory note? Well, that's going to be another word for an IOU. So the note states the terms of the loan, like the interest and the number of years which the borrower has to pay back the loan. So I think the best way to remember this is, again, it's just like another word or another phrase for IOU. It just states the terms of the loan, like all the details, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that's it for that one. Okay, property management. What is property management? So think that one over. I think you guys should be familiar with this one. Okay, What's property management, guys? Well, it's the overseeing of real estate and property. So obviously, property management is done by what? Well, that would be this right here, the property manager. And what is a property manager? Well, property manager is someone hired to maintain and manage property. Now, what's super interesting about property managers, which doesn't say on here, but I'm going to tell you guys anyway, um, you actually have to get a real estate license to be a property manager in some states. And maybe that's why you guys are here today. Maybe that's your plan. And if that is, that's awesome. Good for you guys. I hope that's something that you guys enjoy doing and like it. Listen, I know some property managers. They love it. So, you know, just a reminder, you don't have to be like a specific real estate agent if you're licensed. There are plenty of fun, awesome careers that you can totally do with a license. You just don't have to, you don't just have to be an agent. A property manager would be a great example of that. But yeah, property manager is just someone to hired to maintain and manage property. So sometimes they'll take care of tenants. Maybe they'll do all the paperwork. Maybe they'll show apartments to potential tenants. Property managers are pretty big in bigger cities where there's big buildings with lots of apartments, things like that. It's going to be more prevalent there, but you'll see property managers in small areas too. So, all right, next one, property tax. So we're sticking with the property theme for the last three. What is property tax? So think about that one. Here's a couple seconds for you guys. Okay, so uh, basically, property tax, super important. It is a real estate ad valorem tax. Remember, we talked about ad valorem earlier? And basically, it's calculated by local government, which is paid by the owner of the property. The tax is usually based on the value of the owned property. So, here's another fun fact about property tax. You are going to be I would say this most, in most instances, and actually almost all instances, in your mortgage, the property tax is going to be included. So, when you're dealing with clients, you should let them know that when they're looking at that mortgage payment. Let's just say it's like $800. 9 times out of 10, that property tax for wherever that is, it's going to be included in the $800 in that mortgage payment. Of course, it does vary, but typically that's the way it works. All right, 199, purchase agreement. What is a purchase agreement? So I believe we talked about this a little bit earlier, but so here's some time for you guys to think this one over. Okay, so what's a purchase agreement, guys? Well, a purchase agreement is a contract that legally binds two or more parties together to use specific obligations that create a legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller. So the key two things are the buyer and the seller. Someone is buying and someone is selling. That's what a purchase agreement is. So you'll see hundreds of these, maybe even thousands of these in your career when you guys pass the exam and get your license. Super important to know kind of what it is, as well as the ins and outs of them. So all right, next one, 200, quit claim deed. A quit claim deed. What is a quit claim deed? So here's some time for you guys to think about that one. Okay, what is a quit claim deed? Well, a quit claim deed contains no title covenant and thus offers no guarantee, no warranty as to the status of the property title. So what does that mean? Well, a quit claim deed is the shortest way to transfer title. And why would you do this with no guarantees? Well, quitclaim deeds are often done in an instance of maybe your father, he wants to move to Florida, and he gives you his property, and he just You don't want to deal with all the mumbo jumbo. He just says a quitclaim deed. He transfers the property to you. It's so much faster. It's so much easier. These are typically done with family members, things like that. There are other exceptions and examples, but um, the main one I think you'll see on the exam is in the instance of that it's like family members transferring things, and that's why again there's no title covenant, no guarantees, because it's just family. It's shorter and easier that way. But all right, well, that's another 50 definitions, vocab words down. We have 55 more to go. Again, if you guys haven't liked or subscribed to this video or to this channel, please do. It really helps us out. If you guys made it this far, there's no reason not to, honestly. we we make so many videos. We try and help everybody pass the exam. That's the goal here. And of course, we're trying to build up a community. So please leave a comment down below. Tell me how you guys did for this 50, what your score was. Did you guys get 50 out of 50? Did you get 45 out of 50? What'd you get? I'd love to hear from you guys. But all right, guys, guess what? Next one, we just have 55 yet, or 55 left, and then we're done. Can you believe that? 255 definitions of vocab words. That's insane. That is so insane. So, all right, I look forward to seeing you guys for the last one, and look for that soon. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, this is Zach from RealEstateLicenseWizard.com. Make today magical.